pardon if some of this is cut off here. This is the Alphabet Nation. Again, they have their own agenda separate from that of women. Or J.K. Rowling, getting back to feminists versus trans, right? It's the next ground of culture war that women and men now have equality. As I pointed to, the college system, the family court system, you could probably cite things where men would have an advantage as well, but that battle now, it's not men and women anymore. Well, I guess I should say that one's still going on between some of the grosser feminist SJ types who still think things aren't equal, who still want more power. But this is another phase of the battle. Two groups that, one, as I was saying previously, is used to sitting at the top of the hierarchy in terms of victimhood. Now you have the up-and-coming contender try to take the crown. So obviously with the Alphabet Nation website, they're looking to advocate for certain individuals. They aren't looking to advocate for straight women. They're looking to advocate for women that fall under their umbrella. So it says here, Montana advances bill to ban trans girls. That's the part that's cut off from the side there, from competing in high school sports. And this actually came out on the 21st, which was the day after Biden signed the executive order. Now, here you're talking about a battleground over elementary girls' rights to be part of the team. So we're talking about elementary level. Stock photo here. Look at, they don't even have jersey numbers. Come on, do better. Montana legislators have advanced a bill to ban trans girls from school sports through the state's House Judiciary Committee. The proposed legislation will require that elementary, high school, college, and private schools that compete against a public school all reject the student athletes. It is unconscionable that Montana lawmakers are focused on restricting trans and non-binary youth's ability to play school sports in the midst of an unprecedented global pandemic and economic turmoil. I would say that that's disingenuous. And even if you're an individual who's an alphabet or a trans and you're somehow watching this video, you're sitting here and you're like, unprecedented pandemic and economic turmoil? That's what they're going with? You can see through that logic and be like, from your perspective, that's not what it's about. To try to play that card is really disingenuous. As I said, you can come up with something better, is the point. You're sitting there probably thinking, I got 10 other things I can say. So trans students, like all students, deserve a chance to learn teamwork and build self-esteem and a sense of belonging with their peers through sports, said Sam Brinton, Vice President of Advocacy and Government Affairs for the Trevor Project. The group runs the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for alphabet young people. And that's cool because we know that those individuals, I don't know about the statistics for the other acronyms, but the T acronym, I believe that number is somewhere near 40%, maybe pushing a little bit higher. So you certainly want to have organizations out there that are looking out for individuals that are struggling with mental health issues and other things of that nature. And I say the same for vets and individuals in general. Mental health is really something that's tough to deal with, and you need people on your side, advocates and things like that. But it's interesting that the statement didn't cite anything you would think they would cite. Like I was just saying, they cite the unprecedented global pandemic and economic turmoil. What's that have anything to do with trans? They went on to talk about a little bit more things, self-esteem, sense of belonging. Yeah, I get that. I was thinking about this when I was just looking at the headlines. The elementary school, and I was thinking, well, elementary school, what we know about biology is we trust the science even when it tells us things we don't like. Biologically speaking, girls hit their growth spurt or first spurt sooner than boys do. So up until about, this is on average, 11, 12, 13-ish, that girls can even be taller than boys. So it doesn't seem like at the elementary and the junior high level that there would be an issue of unfair competition, for instance. Say if it were biologically true that boys age 12 were on average 7 feet tall, and girls on average were 4 feet tall, and then you fielded a team of trans females wanting to compete against biological females, well, I know where I'd put my money if I had to bet on that. Biologically speaking, generally boys and girls are the same size up until, what do they say, like about 11, 12, 13-ish or so, before boys hit that growth spurt and then another growth spurt. Tulsi Gabbard introduces bill to ban trans athletes from women's sports. Faces backlash over blatantly transphobic legislation. And that's what I said, they'll always throw the phobic or the ism or whatever kind of label they can put on you right away if you don't agree to what they want. For whatever side that doesn't get their way, they'll start stomping their feet and crying and throwing their hands in the air, throwing out any insult they can think of to try to get public perception on their side. So Tulsi Gabbard, you know about her. And this was actually December 11, 2020. So a full month before Biden did what he did. The bill, which Gabbard and Mullen, he is an individual from Oklahoma, Republican, who co-sponsored the legislation with her. They're calling it the Protect Women's Sports Act of 2020, seeks to limit Title IX protections based on biological sex as determined at birth by a physician. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 prohibits discrimination in any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And that is part of the argument now, is you have these individuals who were born men now competing as women. Does that create some kind of discrimination? Because in essence, it's the argument coming from one side is they're saying, okay, well, now they're taking advantage away from biological females. Is that in itself discrimination? That seems to be one of the major arguments that's coming out of those individuals that are out there trying to protect the rights of girls and women in sports. So it's interesting. Culture war stuff, it happens in all these venues and areas where you wouldn't think to find it. 5, 10 years ago, you wouldn't even think about these kind of things, but it just goes to show, or it'll kind of lead us to this point of like 5 to 10 years from now, will this be still being debated? Will this have been resolved? My feeling has always been pretty consistent that once you get up to a number sustainable of individuals who feel they're trans male or trans female, that you can separate those into separate competing groups as well. That you have the biological requirement there, but then you can have separate competition for those individuals. So male, female, trans male, trans female. 4 separate categories of competition. Simple enough, right? But the numbers at this point just don't sustain that. Now, over time, and this is what I theorized in my other videos, was it's at the high school level now, and I think we kind of see it trickling down. A lot of celebrities are saying their kid is trans or their kid's non-binary, and by and large, those individuals, I think they're just attention seekers. People who legitimately feel a certain way. When this goes through high school and then gets onto the college level, and then as we move towards the Olympics and stuff like that, I think that just like with that powerlifter example, you're really going to start to see where the fight really begins. And then I think people will ultimately come to the consensus that, hey, like as the numbers start to grow, yeah, now it's time to split this off because it's becoming problematic. Men aren't winning, women aren't winning, trans aren't winning. How can you find a way to help everyone win? So that's my solution. Long term, separate but equal. 4 separate competitive divisions based on, as I said, men, women, trans men, and trans women. Simple enough, right? 5 states consider ban on trans athletes competing against biological females. And this was on January 10th. So again, before the Biden executive order came down. Now, surprisingly enough, when I was looking through the states that were included in this, here, legislation are pre-filed or introduced. And it says here in New Hampshire, Washington, 2 surprises, right? Deep blue areas. Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, maybe not so much of a surprise. Interesting that they would have those legislations begun, and anybody could start a legislation, but it says here, and this is the Soule case I was talking about, they mention it here. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, quick rundown. For example, since 2017, in Connecticut, 2 biological males have dominated women's track and field, winning 15 state championship titles that were previously held by 10 biologically female Connecticut athletes. Last fall, Montana's Big Sky Conference named a male-born cross-country runner identifying as female as the female athlete of the week. So look at the math real quick. They said that 15 titles, they were previously held by 10 different girls, meaning each girl would have won one, some won two, maybe some won three. But you had 10 women splitting up the 15 championships. Here you had 2 who were born biologically male who won 15. They cleaned house. So that's what the lawsuit was about, and that's what the Soule case was about for those individuals who weren't familiar with it. As I said, though, she kept working hard, and now she's going to college to run at the University of Charleston, South Carolina. All right, let's get back to your boy Biden real quick. Let's just read the headlines. This video is getting a little bit long, so we want to cut it off here. And I'm sure a lot of you have some strong thoughts on this. This definitely won't be the last time that I'm visiting the topic. Biden signed an executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or orientation hours after taking office. Many claim that the order will now make it compulsory for schools to allow trans female students to compete in girls' sports. The order was slammed by some critics who say it will disadvantage cis girls. They accused Biden of erasing women and imposing a new glass ceiling, but many alphabet activists hailed the executive order, arguing that Biden is making good on his promise to create a more unified and inclusive country. That's what I referenced previously, the hierarchy, right? The pyramid. That's groups fighting each other to see who gets to be at the top of the pile. It's a situation, as I see it, where there's no winning. It's like you have an argument with your wife, and one of you wants a kid, and the other doesn't. Well, it's not really a debate that can be won by either side, or there's no compromise, I should say. There's no real compromise in this situation. It's females are now going to be forced to compete against these trans females. And that's it. There's no compromise. And that's what I was talking about before, was setting aside, as numbers grow, setting aside a separate competition division for those trans athletes, right? Creating those 4 competition divisions. The decision to allow trans athletes to compete in sports alongside their cisgender peers has caused controversy in recent years. In March 2020, Idaho became the nation's first to prohibit trans students who identify as female from playing on female teams at public schools. Currently, 16 states have friendly policies that help facilitate full inclusion of trans and non-binary students into high school athletics. The Trump administration was opposed to the inclusion of trans female athletes in girls' sports and threatened to pull funding. So you see 2 drastically different takes on this from 2 administrations. On the 19th of January, you have one thing, and then as the clock turned to noon on the 20th, total end of the spectrum. So here's what I would say, just in conclusion. I gave plenty of thoughts. This video is getting really long. You have a situation where the alphabet people are cheering this on, but they only cheer it on because they see it through their eyes. They can't see what kind of a disadvantage is being created on the female athletes. Young girls, young ladies in college, they don't see how it's disproportionately affecting those women. It's what they always say. It's why you don't see men and women trying to compete for the same spot in the NFL or the NBA, for instance. We might have a situation where they pretend like a female can compete with men in college football as a kicker. We've seen that. We've seen the praise that's gone that individual's way for not being able to do the job half as well as the worst male kicker, right? We've seen these kind of things happen. That's a battle right there. This is another battle. The alphabet people aren't able to see things through the eyes of the females and young girls that are being disadvantaged through this. But who has a voice in the fight? As I said, nobody wants to hear what I have to say, because, and the old cis thing, as they even identified here, cis, can you believe that? Feminists, they have been in a position of privilege for so long that now they're being forced to take a back seat. Must be kind of odd for them, right? So it's just this interesting dynamic that goes on where there is no compromise at this point. Just to tie it all together one last time, I think ultimately you get to a point where it looks like something what I said earlier. You have 4 separate classes of individuals competing together, because at some point it's going to be a situation, not now, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, where every event at the high school level, and if you want to take it back to junior high, I guess, but at the high school level, then as it proliferates through college, that you're going to see that every event that's female is being won by a trans female. So then there's going to come separate legislation from that. A new law would come out saying, hey, now that we don't have any biological women competing in these sports, we need to create a separate category for biological females. So the battleground, we'll see where it goes from here, everybody. Take care, everybody. Be well.